Imagine getting this phone call, and it was the receivers calling saying, banks rejected your offer. We're coming in to shut down the business, seize all the assets. If you want to tell your staff, you have a half an hour. We'll be there in 30 minutes. And that was the call I got on Tuesday, April 13th, 2010.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Behind Their Success podcast. I'm Peyton Squires, the host. And this morning we have on Andy Buyting. He is a two-time international best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, strategic advisor. He is a leader in business development and marketing and has helped businesses grow all over North America with his integrated print and digital marketing strategy. Andy, welcome on the show.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. So tell me, you say you guys are about 10 years old. Tell me a little history.
Yeah, so the whole idea came, people often ask, so what was the inspiration of the business? And I grew up in family business, and we were in the retail home and garden space. And I remember in the early 90s, I started in my father's business at the time. I started collecting mailing addresses because there's no such thing as email back then. So I started collecting mailing addresses, and we started doing our own newsletters. And it was by far the most effective marketing that we did as a company was staying connected with our customers, allowing them to hear the latest and greatest news and influencing their thinking around home and garden. And so we did quarterly newsletters for a long time. And in the 2000s, I went to a program at MIT called Birthing of Giants, and the facilitator, the person that ran it, was a gentleman by the name of Vern Harnish. And Vern wrote the book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. He's later written Scaling Up. And I really became a fan of his methodology and his teachings, and he's become a lifelong mentor and kind of an advisor of mine. And I remember in the early days, Vern saying, own the ink in your industry. That's what he said. Own the ink in your industry. Whatever your customers are reading, have it come from you. I remember chatting with him one night. I said, what is that? How would you see that translate for my business? This is what we're doing. He said, you're already doing it. You're doing it with the newsletters. You were doing content marketing before it was a word. Mm-hmm. It was done on paper, and it was done in 2-color, and it went out through the mail system. But he said, if you really want to own the ink in your industry, he said, why don't you start publishing a series of books or publish your own gardening magazine? And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So we came back, talked to the team, and decided to upgrade our 8-page 2-color newsletter to a 32-page full-color magazine. And then I remember one of the young ladies working with me in the office, she said, I bet, Scott's Fertilizer, I bet Crocs, I bet some of the suppliers that we sold a lot of their products, I bet they would sponsor this magazine. So long story short, we went from sending out these 2-color 8-page newsletters quarterly to sending out 32-page full-color magazines to 30,000 people for less money than we were doing the newsletters for, because we had some ad sponsorship. And that's kind of where it started. And what was interesting is, as we were doing them for a couple of years, they were getting the attention. They were gaining the attention of other garden centers in Canada. Like, people were just coming to me that I'd never met, never knew before. They, a lot back in those times, a lot of people did newsletters, but they said, tell me about this magazine program. I hear you're doing it like cheaper than I'm sending out these newsletters and flyers and everything else. So I shared with them, and there was a lot of interest. So I hesitated for a long time. I'm like, no, we're retailers first, and we're doing this on the side. But one fellow convinced me. He said, why don't you come up, put together a program, come up and pitch it to our group. And if there's lots of interest, then maybe there's something there. Well, I went up and I thought, if I have 5 or 6 garden centers that are really interested and willing to put down the money to invest in this, maybe there's an opportunity here. Well, after like a 20-minute pitch, I had purchase orders from 14 garden centers with a total distribution of over 500,000 magazines in our very first print run. And I thought, holy.
Well, look what I found.
Long story short, that spun out, over a few years, that spun out into a whole separate business. And that's where I focus my time now, is in the marketing space with Tulip Media. And we started doing magazines for garden centers then my insurance guy said, that garden magazine that you're doing, could you do one for business and do it for my company so I can expand my commercial insurance business? And said, sure, I know enough about business. I can, put together a content calendar and so on. And started doing it there. And then we got into just, now we're doing magazines for a lot of associations, industry associations, to insurance agencies, to law firms, to consulting agencies, to manufacturing companies, to you name it, we're doing magazines. And that, of course, led into the digital side of things too. So,
yeah. I see where your name Tulip Media came from, right? Is that from the Garden Center?
The Garden Center. And I have to be honest, when I came up with it, it's a little nod to my ancestors. My family's all Dutch, so tulips. And also, we always say we help you become, and that's the jacket I have on. There's one red tulip in a sea of yellow, so we help you stand out, become the red tulip in the sea of yellow.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. You're right. Like you came onto that in the '90s or whatnot, and like that's still what everybody does today, just in a little different form, right? Just generally, right? A whole lot more of it has gone digital, but it really was. It was true. You were doing content marketing before anybody even knew what that was, and that is something in my business I've focused on, in the last few years, and that's kind of what this podcast is about. I have personal branding and different things like that, and it's really to just share yourself, be authentic, and paint yourself as an authority of the subject, right? I mean, I think that's really the value there.
Yeah, I remember Vern saying, he said every CEO, everyone in this room should write a book. And you don't have to be an English major or a really talented writer. It's your ideas. Your industry, you're an expert in what you do, right? Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, said that the 10,000 hour rule. Well, if you work in your field and you focus on your field, whatever that might be, for 5 years, that's 10,000 hours. Like, more than 99% of the population out there. So if you can share your knowledge through content, and, I'll be honest with you, we do this for our clients, is I'm not an English major, never was. And if I write an article or a book, like an article would take me all day and it wouldn't be that good.
Yeah.
And I know my ideas have some merit. So what I do is, record my thoughts into a recording app, send it off to my ghostwriter. She writes it up much faster than I ever would and much more beautifully than I ever would. It hits the points. So being an authority in your marketplace doesn't mean you have to be a writer. You just have to get your knowledge on paper somehow. ChatGPT does this really well.
Never been easier than today.
Never been easier. That's right. You still need a good editor. So our ghostwriters have now kind of morphed into really good editors, because you still need the human in the loop to make sure you drive home the points you want to drive home for your business. But, AI is even making this easier to execute. So there's no reason why, everyone can't be a published author, whether it be in their own magazine or someone else's magazine or their own book. By being a published author, you are deemed as an expert in your industry. It's that authority marketing, right?
Yeah. And years ago, I put together a few little ebooks like that. And it was generally just content marketing. And you know what? Like, I don't ever promote the books, and they're probably a little outdated at this point, but like, I make like $20 a month off those books. So, and it's been doing, I spent like, a couple $100 in several hours years ago on that. And I still get paid $20 a month. And more importantly, it's not even about the money and those types of things. Honestly, I should probably just give them away. But it's really the authority and that I can put the term author behind my name.
Yeah. And with our books and with our magazines, when you can hand somebody a copy of your own magazine or your own book, it's done its job. It positioned you as an authority in your marketplace. And even our own books, I'm with you. I've given away a lot more than I've sold, because we bring them to conferences and we give them away by the box load. And it's not, not the goal of making the, whatever it is, $10, $20 per book. The goal is to get it out there. And when people need what you're doing, they think of you first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you've ever listened to Alex Ramosi. He's a big, obviously huge business guy on the internet right now. And that's his whole thing, is like the stuff he works on and gives away free to his listeners and followers is better than stuff that's sold for $10,000. You know what I mean? He gives so much value to
Yeah.
his people that his actual business, and he's looking for very few people there and very specialized people there that like all the deals just flow to him.
And that's just it. People, when you read about sales, you learn about sales, it's nearly impossible to hit the person at the exact right time when they're in a buying decision mode. Because, let's say for your services, I remember, reading one time, this was one author's opinion, but a person that will buy your services, they only really are thinking about purchasing your services. There's a 3% chance that you actually connect with them at the time that they're making that decision. So what you want to do is you want to influence their thinking so that they receive value from you for months, years, whatever the time frame is, long before they actually need to make that buying decision. So that when you think of things that you don't buy often, whether it's vehicles or insurance or whatever, when the time comes that you're in the buying decision with the vehicles once every 4 or 5 years, let's say, well, when you make the decision, okay, you know what, I need to upgrade or get another vehicle, chances of an advertiser hitting you right in that moment is slim to nil. You're going to go to the dealership that you're most comfortable with, the brand that you already have a good feeling around. That's where you're going to start at least. And that branding, that authority marketing, that branding is built over a period of time. It's not right in the moment. So that's what publishing content, whether it's on a blog, the other thing too, if you're going to write content, put it out there in multiple formats. Yeah. So whenever we work with a client partner on their magazine, every article is written to be keyword optimized. It's all strategically planned out. That's why you got to review chat's content too, because the chat won't necessarily do it well. You write content that's keyword optimized, put it in your magazine, put it on your blog, put it in a LinkedIn article, put it out there in multiple formats. We now, one of the biggest growing little small offering in the digital side is when we write articles, because we write hundreds of articles a month for client partners, is for a little upcharge, we can actually rewrite the script and create a video out of it. So you can actually get, again, it's that one idea, that one concept that paid maybe you have for your audience that you get out there in multiple ways, because everybody consumes content in different ways. And when they do, and they need your services, they think of you first.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all, you're right. It's all about being top of mind, right? And when that moment arises, it's like, you notice all the big brands of the world. It's like, I don't know, think of like, I don't know, beer, like Bud Light or even like Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever. It's like their marketing is such playing the long game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It is such a long game, right? It's not like, hey, buy this now, right? It is, hey, here's our brand. Here's things that are associated with it. When you're watching football, you think of Bud Light. It's such a long-term game that so many people that are in this like short marketing they're doing of like, hunting and killing and trying to just call to actions and all those things. And there's a time and space for some of that stuff, and depending on what business you're in. But like the branding, that is where real value comes from, and allows you to have premium pricing, right? You can have premium pricing because people like you and want to work with you. And and the trust is there, right? The sales process, like, as a person that puts out a lot of marketing and nurtures a lot of people, like my sales is very much not high pressure or anything. It's because people already, quote unquote, know me, right?
That's right.
The trust is already there.
Yeah. And even if you're doing the short term, like you're doing sales calls, somebody says, okay, that's interesting. Send me some samples. When you can send some samples of the work you do, most companies do that. But if you can also include, well, here's a free copy of our book that talks about marketing, or here's a free, copy of our own magazine. Even though it's a short sales tactic that you're using, by including this content that you're creating, a customized magazine or book or sort of a authority marketing piece. If you're getting 3 proposals and one of them is coming from a published author, then you kind of lean towards, they may actually know what they're talking about more than the others do.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's just that authority, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Andy, kind of looking back, you've obviously grown a successful business. What would you say is your best skill?
It's an interesting journey that I've had, Peyton, because I've come to realize, I always tell people, it's really important in life to know what you're good at, and equally as important to know what you're not good at. And it only took me 50 years to figure that out.
Only about 35. So.
And, go away and ask people to go away and figure it out, in one session is sometimes difficult. But so myself, I'm really good at strategy. And it's interesting because one of my partners, he said it best. He said, you're a great startup guy. You can take an idea, whether that's a new business or it's a new market or it's a new product that you want to do. And where I'm really skilled at, what I'm really good at is taking an idea, making it actually come to fruition. So he said, you're a guy who can take an idea, you can build the car, get it on the track in the race and actually racing. Mm-hmm. However, if you don't get someone else in the driver's seat soon afterwards, you'll get bored and you're going
to run off and whatever. Yeah.
You'll want to see what that car can do off road. And so that's been, when I look back, that's been the history of my business career. And as soon as I started really embracing it, a few years ago, as an example, I came to the realization, I'm unapologetic about it. I'm a really great startup guy, strategy guy, but I'm not a good operator. I'm not a good business operator. And it's weird for a business CEO or leader to say
right?
That.
Yeah,
it is. But I'll tell you, for those entrepreneurs out there, I see that in a lot of entrepreneurs. They're good startup people. They will take an idea and they'll get it going. With Tulip Media, for instance, we got it going and it grew really fast in the early years. And then it kind of plateaued for a few years. Mm-hmm. And that's when I made the decision I should not be the operator here. So we hired a president about 2-3 years ago. And since then, now, okay, we got this car. It works well. It's competing really well. It's in the race and performing well, but we know it can go the long haul. But I just know enough about myself. I'm not going to be the person to do that. So Trevor now is our company president, and he's operating it and moving it forward and growing it. I still get involved in the strategy, and the way we work it is he owns the profit and loss. I own the balance sheet.
There you go.
So that's, if it hits the profit and loss, it's his baby. Obviously, we all need to agree. If it has to do with the balance sheet, it's my baby. And that's how we split up responsibilities. And it works really, really well. And the business has grown substantially. Our average deal used to be 40 to 45,000 a year. It's now grown well north of that, 6 figures, the average deal. And it's going really, really well because everybody in the company too now has a leader with some consistency.
Clear roles, right?
Clear roles, consistency, and they're moving forward and they're making it happen. And our client partners are like, our NPS score is literally 100. Like, we cannot find anyone that does not rate us a 9 or a 10 out of, the last time we did one, I think 38 reviews or something. So,
and for the listeners, what he's talking about there is net promoter score.
Net promoter score is 100. And that means that everybody's rating either a 9 or a 10. Mm-hmm. Like every client that we have. And, production's going well, sales are going well, it's profitable, and profit's growing faster than sales, which is nice as a percentage. But it only took me 50 years to figure that out.
Yeah, I found it really interesting, as an accountant by trade, you talking about splitting the roles based off the income statement or the balance sheet. And I'd never thought of it in that term before. But it's I could see that, right? Your operations guy, you may call him your integrator, right? He owns the income and expenses, and the balance sheet, you're owning much more of the assets, the liability, and really the direction, the overall direction, which a lot of, like I said, the balance sheet has shown a lot of the history of that and the proof of that going forward. That's kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah. And the way it translates itself, because I've had people say, what does that mean? Like, practically, what does that mean? My short answer is he's in charge of making profits. I decide how those profits are invested.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I mean, in practical terms, we've got into a rhythm where every quarter we have a conversation, which is here's how the performance from last quarter and the profits that were made. Here's the budget or the latest business estimate for the next quarter. And then we talk about, okay, the profits that were made last quarter. And he always makes a pitch and says, okay, we follow profit first methodology that Mike Michalowicz talks about. But, so we siphon all the profits off every quarter. And then, that's what I own. And he makes the pitch and says, I want to grow into this market. I want to try to work on these strategic partnerships. And I need an investment of this much. So he pitches those ideas, and myself and, I have a couple of minority partners, but we get together and we say, okay, here's the ideas for investment. And what are we going to do with the profits? And, profits go in one of three buckets. They either get reinvested in the P&L and give it back to Trevor. So he invests in hires new other marketing people or salespeople, or invest in these conferences or whatever the case might be. You give it to the P&L, you strengthen the balance sheet. So you do that by paying off your debt. Fortunately, we're debt free, but we build up a war chest, and so that's strengthening the balance sheet, or it's distributed as dividends to the partners. So it's very strategic. He runs the day to day, and I'm not involved in that. Virtually, I just get updates once a week, where we do have good, deep discussions. Is what are we going to invest in next? Mm-hmm. Where are we going to grow the business? Where do we see it going? And what does that look like? And how much investment does it require? What does that mean for the company? And I have the final say in that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're describing there, what I think is rare, or what impresses me about what you described there, is the intentionality behind all that, right? Yeah. Like, you're very intentional about, okay, cash is generated. Let's talk about where it's invested. Does it make sense to leave it in the business and invest in ABC? Does it make sense to just oh no, let's just take it as a distribution. It's best to just distribute it. And that level of intentionality in businesses doesn't exist. Or very you know what I mean? That's not true, but very few people are having that type of conversation.
And we follow the profit first methodology, where we physically siphon the profits off. We bill all our clients the first of the month. By the 10th, profits are siphoned off. So there's a separate account with that balance, and we look at it and say, okay, what are we doing with this quarter?
Yeah, and that's your war chest, your nest egg, to say, hey, where's the best place to put these dollars to get us the best return, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, and it works really well.
So, looking back through your career, tell me one of the best decisions you've made.
Well, I think, the best decision is, like I said, it took me 50 years to figure that out. And it is to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. So that one is one of them. Another one that I'll share with you is, and actually that's what we open our book with, the Double Sales, Zero Salespeople, is we call it the Great Pivot of 2019. And what it was, we were growing the business. And like I said, we had grown really quickly for 3-4 years, it was exponential growth. And then it plateaued for about 2 years. We were going into our third year, and not happy with how it was running. And I remember at that time, I listened to, it was actually a good friend of mine. He spoke at a business group that I belong to, and he's from Denver. And he talked about how he completely flipped his business on its head and completely changed his go-to-market strategy. Now he's in the high-end construction renovation business, but he let go of his entire sales team and let designers work with a really good automated marketing process, and allowed the designers, the home designers, to be the sales team. So take the pressure off the buying experience by letting the potential customers work with a designer, and then just do a soft close. Anyway, long story short, in the early days, we were growing by smiling and dialing. We had grown a sales team of about 7 people, sales manager and a whole team, costing $1 million a year. And they were not producing results. It was a losing battle. And I remember at that time with my partners, I said, we've got to change something drastically, or we're just not going to work. It's not going to work. We were not growing fast enough, and we were burning too much cash trying to grow. So after a lot of discussions, it was not a decision that was taken lightly at all. It took several weeks to come up with the plan. But there's one Wednesday afternoon I came in and I let the entire sales team go. Wow. All at once.
Scary.
Scary, but one of the best decisions I ever made. And the way I put it is that we had the courage, looking back, we had the courage to destroy something that was good in the pursuit of something that was great. And I remember getting the team together afterward. We were a company of about 14 people. 7 of them were salespeople. So we let go 50% of the workforce in one day in 2019. Came back with the rest of the team and I explained what I did, what the reasons for it, the fact that, my 2 minority partners were involved in the decision. It was not on my own, and our plan for moving forward. And at the time we had a young marketing intern who, what I appreciated about him is he was not afraid to try anything. He just kept trying, iterating, trying different things. And I said, we're going to, at that time we were getting into digital marketing in a big way with our client partners. I said, we're going to put all our eggs in that marketing basket using our magazines, our authority marketing that we had been doing for a long time, but then using more direct tactics through digital marketing. And then people said, well, who are going to make the sales calls? So, well, that's where you guys come in. So over the last, number of years, I noticed client partners love talking to the project managers, to the designers, graphic designers, so on, because you guys are the ones, that's where their creative juices flow, and you bring them energy, and they just love talking to you. So when sales calls come in through the website, now we're not going to make an outbound sales call. When interested parties come through our website, you guys are going to take the call and you're going to talk about it. And because you know the process better than anyone, you're going to talk to them about what's possible and the colors and the designs and, how much fun you're going to have creating these projects. And when the time comes that the other person's excited about it too, here's your closing line is, look, Peyton, we would love to get started on this project with you. If it's a positive response, get it in the calendar and then say, you know what, if you're all good and you're good with the pricing and everything, I'll have, our accountant send a contract over and we've got our meeting booked to launch your project 2 weeks from Thursday or whatever. And that was it. I would come in to sometimes close on some of the larger deals, but it was interesting. We had, we were going into our planning session at the time and we always set a sales goal for the quarter. And I remember I said, I think we should keep it the same as what it was last quarter. My right-hand person banged on the table. Don't set us up for failure. I said, no, trust me. We're already starting, this marketing intern has got some things going, getting a lot of attention. And wouldn't you know it, about a week before, 10 days before our quarter ended, we hit our sales quota for the first time in 18 months.
Yeah, with half the people.
With no salespeople.
Yeah.
And they said, well, if this is going to make us too busy. I said, we'll hire more production people.
Yeah. We'll
take sales calls. And that was probably one of the best decisions that we made in the growth of the company. It was a hard decision.
Yeah.
The best ones are hardest.
I'm so in the middle of something similar like this, of a very real pivot in my business. And yeah, it's scary. I mean, I've, I did CPA trade, ran my own business for over a decade. And, I've built up my business in a very traditional CPA firm type way and really trying to transition to different styles of work. And I have to have a lot of hard conversations, have a lot of, and I'm a relationship guy and I've built relationships with hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs. And so many of them now are just not going to be along for the ride moving forward. And that's fine, just because they have different needs and where I'm going, it's probably not going to work. But at the same time, doesn't make it any less scary, but it's really, it's helped me that, I'm working with a consulting company that's, it's obviously been through this process a million times. So I'm just sitting here trying to let go. I'm like, whatever you guys say, I'm just going to do it. And, but it's still, it still doesn't make it any less scary.
No, and I think that Wednesday afternoon, Peyton, to be honest with you, I think I cried more than they did because there were some good friendships there. I shed more tears than anyone. It was a tough afternoon. But when something deep inside is the right decision, you have to follow through with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So
Yeah.
now on the flip side of that, Andy, tell me one of the big old mistakes you've made.
I've made several mistakes. So the biggest one is the one that caused me to reinvent my entrepreneur career is in the family business again. I took it over in 1998, purchased it from my father, my parents, and I grew it very quickly. We grew it sixfold over a period of about 10 years. But it was a tough industry. When the 2008, 2009, the whole financial fallout happened with the banking system and so on, that affected us in a very direct way because the banks changed their lending policies. We no longer qualified for the loan. So long story short, we, they called everything, and it was about $6.5 million at the time. So for us, it was a big, big number for our small business. And, but when I look at it, it's easy to, people say, oh, it was not your fault. It was the banks. I said, no, I've always taken responsibility for my decisions. I said, I was the one who was over leveraged. Like I should never have been in that situation. So that in 2008, everything started happening and unrolling. But long story short, we went through bankruptcy protection, but we lost that business in 2010. It took 2 years because we started running. And I remember when I told all the staff, everybody, that I said, it feels like we've been running, this pit bull was chasing after us for the last 2 years. And we've been running, trying to outrun it. We're not outrunning it. So we're going to stop in our tracks. We're turning around. We're facing this thing. And that's through bankruptcy protection, restructuring. And so we're either going to come out the other end fully intact, half intact, or not intact at all. And unfortunately, the latter is what happened. So we lost the whole business. And it all came down to, I shared this story at a presentation at the local university here a couple of weeks ago. And I started to talk I said, imagine getting this phone call. And it was the receivers calling saying, banks rejected your offer. We're coming in to shut down the business, seize all the assets. If you want to tell your staff, you have a half an hour. We'll be there in 30 minutes. And that was the call I got on Tuesday, April 13th, 2010.
Man, and I was a senior in college then. Yeah, man, I can't imagine, right? And the awesome thing is, though, it's like I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, right? And it's amazing the quote unquote more successful ones or ones that have grown even larger and larger things. How many of them have lost everything?
Yeah.
And maybe even multiple times.
Near all of them. I would say, it's 75, 80% or more have lost everything or very, very close to it at some point.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's wild.
Yeah.
So, Randy, last question for you, man. What, I say going back to that date, when you say April 2010, what piece of advice would you give that man right now from your perspective?
Actually, it would be the piece of advice that I received from my mentor that same day, because I call one of my mentors, this guy sold an engineering firm, had 5 corporate planes. So he was very successful, but he lost everything when he was 42. And I remember he said, you may not see this right now, but you've just gone through the most expensive, but the most effective business PhD program you can ever attend. And by definition, an entrepreneur is somebody who makes things happen. So every setback, you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the next, and every setback will just make you stronger. And I know it's a cliche, but it is. And you'll look back. He said, someday you're going to look back and you're going to be grateful that this happened for you. It didn't happen to you. It happened for you. Yeah. So every setback, think of, how do I make this really bad situation become something that in a year's time, 2 years time, or 6 months time, I can look back and say that happened for me. And I'm so glad it did.
Yeah, man. So yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. And, not just to keep taking the story back to me, but that's I can already see things that even happened 12 months ago, or I was in the middle of it. I'm like, what is this all about?
Yeah.
And like, this is really difficult to deal with. And already now, like, I'm like, oh, that was what absolutely had to happen. And I'm grateful for it now, like truly grateful, because I can I can look back and already connect the dots. I'm like, wow, I actually dodged a bullet. So it's amazing, right? You can always, it's really hard in the middle of it, but always trying to remember that, like, you've survived everything before, and really everything you've experienced has propelled you forward, right? And it's trying to have that like anti-fragile type personality that, someone punches you, it actually makes you stronger, not weaker.
Yeah. And I love that term, anti-fragile. A lot of young people, have a hard time with that, and I'd really, 2 teenage kids, myself, I really try to instill that anti-fragility.
Yeah.
It's okay to get hit down. It's okay to be knocked down. It's okay to be set back, and to go through struggles. I love it when they go through stresses, when it's good stresses, right?
Yeah.
Because it'll just make them stronger next time.
Yeah. And that's a tough thing for entrepreneurs, right? Some level of successful entrepreneurs, your kids, it's like, what do we expose them to? We want to protect them, but then at the same time, what the crap me and my wife went through as kids, like my kids don't experience at all. And it's amazing. I'm in the mastermind group too. And we were just in Mexico for 4 or 5 days this last week. And the amazing thing is, like, everybody in that circle has like serious childhood trauma. That is like, what I mean? That has like propelled them, to be the just badasses they are today. Because they harnessed that and figured out how to harness that.
Yeah, for sure.
Andy, man, it's been a great conversation. What is the best way people can connect with you or follow you or get to know you a little better?
Well, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm not overly active on social. I know I should be, but I'm not. But connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Andy Buyting, Buyting, or on our website, tm.media/double sales, named after the book. And there you can actually book. There's a few offerings there, but one of them is to book like a half an hour call, because I love talking business, marketing strategy, whatever. And if they want to go there, you could actually book a half hour call. And I love getting those calls. It's just it's a fun way to spend a half an hour. So
that's awesome.
They can reach out to me there anytime.
Awesome. Andy, I appreciate you coming on the show. Anything you want to leave for listeners?
Just keep going. I touched on at the very end is believe that, the world, that you'll be successful. Believe that what you need in the world will come to you. And it's amazing when you have those setbacks, they look at it with enthusiasm and say, I'm so grateful that this is happening, because what's my lesson in this? I'm going to learn something, and this is going to be exciting. And it's funny how the world, the universe provides when you look at it and through that lens and expect good things to happen and do the work to make it happen. So stay positive, keep moving forward.
Awesome, Andy. Appreciate you. Listeners, we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you found it valuable, please rate, review, and share it. That is the best way to help us build this and reach more people, as we're trying to accomplish our goal of help creating more healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. You can follow us on social media by searching for me, Peyton Squires, or going to PeytonSquires.com. On the website and social media, we're always sharing tips of personal growth, and there we can actually interact. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.